Hey, Tracii, how's it going?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm good, my friend. You're over in Europe right now?
I am.
Oh, what are you doing over there? Just bumming around, or are you on tour?
No, I live here.
Oh, even better. All right. I didn't know you'd moved.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm been up for hours and you've been up for only a few.
Well, I normally get up 4:30 on Sundays like this in the morning. So today's one of the lucky days I got to sleep in. But yeah, you've been up a lot longer than I have right now, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. But the sun's still up here, so it's nice.
Well, that's good. And I'm in Florida where it's almost always having the sun up, so I can't complain then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, usually it's dark here, but this time of the year we have light for 3 months, and then for 9 months we have no light.
What part of Europe are you in?
Denmark.
Oh, man, I've always wanted to go to Denmark. That place sounds awesome.
You should come. It's really nice here.
I would love to see pretty much all of Europe, Denmark, Holland, Germany, Austria. Yeah, just pretty much the whole damn thing. I want to see I don't have the money for it yet, so.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it's not cheap. Nothing's cheap, is it?
No, it's not. But I guess if you move there and live there, at least to travel to and from the big places is a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. I've traveled Europe so much that I just kind of stay here. I don't have any desire to go anywhere.
Is it better than LA?
Oh, yeah.
It looks like we got Andre on the line now, too. Andre, can you hear us?
I can hear you, man. Am I supposed to
Right.
put video on or not?
I don't have it on because I didn't put my camera up, so.
Okay, cool. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thanks for calling in or joining us this morning. And I watched the documentary just last night. It was a great documentary. Had a blast. Learned things I didn't know about. So
Awesome.
let's start with Tracii. How did it come about? You ended up being the narrator for this.
I would assume that Andre said, that Tracii Guns guy would be the right guy to talk about Randy Rhoads. And I agree. I agree with him.
That leads into my second question, which was, the original lineup of Quiet Riot and pretty much all of Randy's career happened shortly before you got to form LA Guns. So did you know and get to play with Randy, or were you just getting started in LA and he was an influence in the scene?
He was a massive influence, and how I became aware of Randy, other than there was a big picture of Quiet Riot on the side of this club called Starwood, and it was an album cover from Quiet Riot 2, where they're in a locker room, and they were dressed like chicks, and I would always drive by, and I didn't know who they were or anything, but Slash had come up to me in 10th grade right before I went into electronics class, and he had seen Ozzy the night before. And he said, "Oh man, I saw this guy is going to be your favorite guitar player, this guy Randy Rhoads." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." But he was right, and I heard him, like over the next weekend with my dad. We were going surfing, and Crazy Train came on, and that changed my whole musical perspective.
So you actually went to school with Slash, and you were part of that, I guess, that high school group of now world famous musicians that were all in school at the same time?
I guess so. Yeah.
Well, Andre, let's get to you. How did you get involved with Randy Rhoads in general and with the documentary? Are you just a huge fan and wanted to look into it more?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge fan, but I have a music division called Vision Music, where we have a pretty good background in producing and releasing music documentaries, music series, anything related to music. And I've always considered Randy Rhoads an enigma. He's a legend, but to many, including myself, he's a bit of a mystery. And so when the opportunity arose to make a documentary on him and his life, I jumped on. I was really intrigued. I mean, as a musician when I was younger, he was like a god, man. He was like an enigma that was, it's like this untouchable legend, but there was a lot of mystery surrounding his life, and I really wanted his story out there.
One of the things that I found a little confusing, if you look at Wikipedia, and of course you can't always trust Wikipedia, but if you look at that compared to your documentary, the doc says that Randy and Kevin were like brothers. Wikipedia says that Kevin wasn't very well liked, but Randy was like, "I like his enthusiasm, so we'll go ahead and hire him." Which did you get more of a sense of?
Me personally, I mean, look, I definitely feel there was a major camaraderie between the two of them. I feel that for whatever reason, just researching, one of the reasons they didn't get signed, it sounds like, at least from, I wasn't around then, but there was some backlash against Kevin, and his demeanor or his attitude. I don't really know what it was, but maybe he wasn't the most likable man at that time. But I do know that Randy and him were best friends. They were super close. So I know as far as their relationship goes, they were tight.
Tracii, since you were back watching that scene as it happened, how did you see it?
No, I would definitely say Kevin and Randy were really close. I mean, which is going to happen, when you're in a band together like that, the lead guitar player and the singer, you kind of have this love-hate relationship, and that's what makes you really good. It's kind of friction at times, but it's like, it's almost beyond blood because you're sharing music and creativity. At the front of the music, so you have a lot of opinions, right? And Kevin certainly was the type of person that had a lot of opinions. So I would imagine that they had, they had a very good relationship, because I know when Randy left, he was really sad, for Kevin in particular, even more than the other guys. And, when he did come back to LA on a break, he jammed with Kevin Dubrow band, and I think Rudy played with him too. This guy Bob Steffen was a guitar player for Kevin Dubrow at the time. But it was, everybody knew that Randy wasn't coming back to Quiet Riot, but I really think that, Kevin really was hoping that he would. And, and I played with Quiet Riot rehearsals only years later, like, 10 years ago or something. And I went out to dinner with Kevin the night before, and he still loved Randy. You know what I mean? Just like, that was his topic of conversation, and, all these things. And that's why, him and Frankie wanted me in the band, because I really have lived, kind of half of my musical career is kind of dedicated to Randy Rhoads. It's I really lean on his personality more than anything when creating music. He just really was a wizard, wasn't he?
Sounds like you and I should spend the next couple of days correcting Wikipedia on a few things.
Yeah, well,
one thing our documentary does delve into just a little bit, and that's something that's discussed, by the original drummer, Drew, was that, he did say that there was a toxic writing relationship that happened, that occurred over the years between the two of them. And so it gets into that a bit, but I mean, that's just what happens in a band, right? I mean, when you're in a band for many years, if you have an alpha dog lead singer, personality, and a super talented guitarist, and they have different ways that they want to write music, they're not always going to see eye to eye. And it seems like that definitely came up.
Well, yeah, I mean, go ahead, Tracii.
To make that really clear, the last 4 records I've done with LA Guns, Phil and I have avoided that by, I have somebody I write everything with. So me and Phil don't have to get into it. And Phil loves that, because he just gets, great finished songs, and all he has to do is be awesome at singing them. It's kind of like a lot like what Elvis did. It's like, here's the songs, and it does make things go a lot smoother, I gotta say.
Well, and you could look at another example from almost the exact same time and place. You've got Van Halen with Eddie and David Lee Roth, who obviously ended up butting heads. And they were similar time, similar scene, kind of a similar sound as Randy and Kevin. So
yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, that's the thing, that if you've been in a band for many years, you're thrown to, unless you all grow up together and you guys have a bond that's very deep. It's really hard to get along with everybody when you're in a band for many years, living together, touring together, writing together, playing shows together. There's so many things that can come up along the way that can cause friction.
Well, yeah, you're married to 3 or 4 other people that you can't even have sex with. You know, what good is that?
Yeah, I've got friends in bands, and some of them have the original core group that's like we're family, and some of them have the original main member, and everybody else kind of rotates in and out every time they roll through town. So it's
right.
it could go both ways. Getting back to, I guess, let's talk about the whole Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads similarities there. It was a little hard for me to tell whether that rivalry between the two was a friendly, let's push each other to get better, or whether it was sort of like, hey, this guy's biting my style, or he's biting my style. How did it seem to, as a guitarist and a band member, Tracii, how did that seem to you or come across to you?
From talking to Rudy Sarzo, I was in a band with Rudy for over a year. And, you know, to me, it never seemed like there was really that much similarity. And I had read in the Guitar Player tribute to Randy issue after he died, Eddie said, yeah, Randy did me to the T. And it's like, no, he didn't, you know, because Eddie plays in these kind of like really cool Eddie style pentatonic, and then he'll stretch the scales a little bit. And it's really cool. Randy sounded really dark almost all the time, but he approached guitar solos in particular from a major key, which in general would sound like country music or, you know, the alphabet, you know, those are major keys. But Randy had a completely different approach to writing music. Maybe because he did some pick tapping, some people do that. But to me, Eddie Van Halen was like, you know, Jimmy Page and Hendrix on steroids, as to where Randy Rhoads was like Mick Ronson on steroids, you know. And if you go back and try to compare Mick Ronson to Hendrix, it doesn't really make sense. And to me, it's kind of the same with Eddie and Randy. Maybe Quiet Riot was a little bit different, but by the time he was an Ozzy, boy, they were different, real different.
I noticed one similarity in that, and I think it was mentioned in the doc, Andre, you could probably speak to this as well, that when they're talking about Randy's guitar playing, he would only put in little fills and tiny little licks that actually added to the song. And Eddie would do some similar, where it's just like 3 or 4 notes, like Crazy Train, when Randy goes, la na 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 na, then he hits that little walk down riff. Yeah, you know, sometimes it's like just a little pump. I love it.
I would say that Randy would have been more influenced by Eddie in that case.
Yeah,
for sure, because you know what Randy was really doing was a little bit behind Eddie as far as playing cover songs and stuff like that. You know, Eddie and Van Halen, they were playing Motown hits, all kinds of stuff, and really leaning towards that popular disco rock kind of thing, more fun, kind of goofy. You know, Van Halen was a real party band, and Randy really seemed like you know, he wasn't that classically influenced as people think or it appears. He was a rocker. You know, he really liked rock and atmosphere and things like that. So I don't know. I just don't really see like what I'm really getting at is like if somebody came on the radio, if Crazy Train comes on and Ain't Talking About Love comes on, if you didn't know who the 2 guitar players were, you wouldn't think they were the same guitar player.
True. Very true.
You know what I mean? That's the best way to perceive that.
Andre, in today's world, obviously, pictures and video are ubiquitous. You literally can't walk down the street without being on video somewhere, whether it's the cops or someone doing an Instagram. How did you find all these awesome live clips and smaller club show pics from way back in the 70s and early 80s? I know they had their own photographer, but you had some really amazing live video.
Well, this was a interesting situation because in this particular documentary, I was fortunate enough to locate a documentary that really never got released, that a gentleman named Ron Sobel, who was the photographer who was really good friends with, you know, Kevin. He had put together this documentary around 2013, 2014 that had a lot of that, you know, underlying footage. So I was able to work with him and license a lot of what he already had, because he was a photographer and because he also, you know, was videotaping from however they did it back then on film. Some of the original performances, he had a trove of material that I was able to license. But I also had to go out there and just find footage. It's not easy. And it's really tough. And frankly, like even the live footage with Ozzy, that was very challenging to find. But I was able to find some gentlemen who had been to an Ozzy Osbourne concert for the tour of Blizzard of Oz many years ago, and he taped it. He snuck in a camera and taped it.
That was back when cameras were huge too. How the hell do you sneak one of those down your pants?
Crazy.
I don't know. It's quite a story.
Tracii, going back to Randy's guitar playing, I was noticing in that that late 70s Quiet Riot live thing where they're doing Randy's solo Laughing Gas. You get to that classical bridge towards the end.
Right.
It's also the exact same opening riff as Goodbye to Romance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you?
I mean, and that makes sense. Like, I don't know if you're a huge Zepp fan.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if you're, I've been obsessed with bootlegs since I was 11 years old with Zeppelin, and you could hear Page, when they're jamming, writing the next album. You know what I mean? They're like, wait a minute, isn't that, and isn't that? And that's really typical of a blues-based jammy guitar player, to kind of, work on stuff, then go up there live and just kind of throw it out there. And, he, like you said, he did make it part of his guitar solo, and then obviously developed it later for Ozzy. But that's fairly, heady, right? Like that's Hendrix league, that's big time. That's like really like, being so scared shitless on stage, but you have such an important piece of music that you just got to fit it in somewhere. And he did it, and then he came up with a great song with it later. And Nikki Sixx was telling me, which I don't necessarily believe it, but Nikki was telling me that Randy played him a cassette of Diary of a Madman, like way back when Nikki auditioned for Quiet Riot. And I don't know what to degree or whatever. I mean, Nikki tells stories, is a great storyteller. But but if it's true, that would mean that, Randy had been working on this stuff for a long time. That there was certain pieces of music that he had been carrying with him and developing, which is really interesting to someone like me, because when I sit down to write a big epic piece of music, I kind of don't spend a lot of time. I kind of have like the ideas, like, okay, this is how I want it to go. I want it to flow like this, dynamics, all these things. But I'm really impressed when people carry music for like, 2 or 3 years and develop into a masterpiece like that. And Diary of a Madman would definitely be one of those. And Revelation Mother Earth, I would think too.
Not to keep bringing up the Eddie Van Halen comparison, but if you listen to that lick at the end of Jump, obviously from David Lee Roth era, he saved that lick and turned it into Top of the World with Sammy Hagar. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, you're allowed to steal from yourself, at least. That's the professional way to do it.
Yeah. Andre, was that you that interviewed Slaughter's bassist Dana Strum that was the bass player that connected Randy and Ozzy?
No, I licensed that as well. I found that interview out there and licensed that material. That was an awesome interview, so I was really happy to find it.
Yeah, and he does a spot-on Ozzy impression too, just right on point.
His accent is great, mate.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was a little confused. I've read that story a number of times. I thought it was Daisley that had said, Ozzy, you got to find Randy, but it was Dana, who wasn't even a part of Ozzy's band.
Yeah, well, I think actually a little bit on the backstory, Dana was the auditioning bassist.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, but like I said, Randy walked in and that was it. So I think that was also the end of Dana. It was like, hey, I got the guy. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, okay, he's the guy. See you, Dana. Kind of a thing. But thank God for Dana Strum, right?
Right, and that's got to suck. Like, hey, I've got the guitar player for you. Great. Now we don't want you as the bass player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Dana, he's a leader. They didn't need a.
That's true.
They didn't need a personality like that.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for taking the time today. May 6th, this will be out on iTunes, Amazon Vudu, Google Play, and many more. The Randy Rhoads documentary, and of course, I'll put links up all over our website and social media. Amazing movie. I loved watching it. I loved learning more, and it was a great time talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
Have a great one, guys.